Welcome to YogiViews, where my guest is yoga itself, through interviewing those who practice it, teach it, sell it, or simply love it. I am Antonio Sausis. This is the second part of a two-part show where I'm interviewing Dr. Joan Vernikos. Ever since the first studies conducted for Dean Ornish proved the validity of yoga to reverse heart conditions, the use of yoga in the therapeutic field has continued to sprout, becoming more and more obvious that yoga holds a tremendous potential for healing. My guest tonight is studying the use of yoga in an unprecedented arena. She is trying to bring yoga therapy as an alternate therapeutic modality to the attention of both NASA and commercial spaceflight companies as to how yoga therapy protocol can really benefit the health of the crew and space travelers in pre, during, and post-flight phases, especially since millions of dollars worth of equipment used has not been able to stop the adverse health effects. She is part of Taksha's Space Health and Aging Institute, an organization that specializes in cross-cutting short courses, lectures, seminars, workshops, and conferences that bring together experts in apparently disparate fields to find common links across the physiology and behavior of the broadest range of human conditions. Here with me today, I have Dr. Joan Vernikos, the former head of NASA's Space Health Program and the executive director of the organization. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've correctly identified that we are living longer, not necessarily better.
Mm-hmm.
But what would be your personal interest in living longer? Because let's grant you that you can be in a healthy, enjoyable, functioning body until 200 or 120. What for?
My philosophy is that living is having a passion. It's not existing. Anybody can exist.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you have a passion, then life is worth living. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. Or have an interest in life when they're young, to do certain things that society or the environment has defined as worthy of success or achievement. And once these are reached or not reached, then they don't know what to do with themselves. We see lots of men in particular retiring and dropping dead a year later.
Correct.
Not because they love their job, but because they've lost the structure that it provided of getting up in the morning and going somewhere and the reward that perhaps they got out of it. So I think we have to look at life in stages and plan it accordingly. You turn 50, in these days, it's midlife is at 50. It's not at 30 or at 20 or whatever it was even a few years ago, or 40. And say at 50, you ask yourself, well, do I just drift and wait to die, or do I do something? And if I do something, do I continue doing what I did, or this is my chance to test, to try?
To play.
To play. And life really is responding to change. You want to call change stress, it can be stress, or it can be fun.
Yes.
You may choose to jump from an airplane.
Yes.
Or you may have change imposed on you. And you have to respond. So how we view change I mean, usually the reaction is fear. I watched Michael Phelps at the Olympics, for instance, being asked about how he prepares, and was he anxious? He said, "Well, it's a mixture of anxiety and pressure and excitement." So you can view the situation and analyze it, if you do, in a split second, as excitement. So you get the fear, you get the trepidation, but you think you're excited, you're playing. Or you can freeze, or regress, or cower, or avoid.
And even because everyone was asking Michael Phelps about, do you want more medals? How do you want more? And he was just every time saying, I'm just having a great time. I'm dancing with, I'm swimming with the best people in the world, and great teammates, having a great time. So obviously this play aspect is very important. And certainly I think you would agree that play and passion have a connection.
Absolutely. 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 And if you have a passion for something, life is worth living. It's food. You know, the gods used to call it food, whatever variety of god you subscribe to. You know, they had a great food analogy for their passion.
Yep.
And you have a passion for one thing today, and you may have a passion for something slightly different tomorrow. I have a passion for helping people be healthy. I'm a voice in the wilderness. I am one. I go out and I speak. And, you know, whoever hears is fine. I keep doing it. But by interacting with people, I learn. And therefore, my ideas become modified and hopefully reach a different level.
Well, you're certainly talking about a very different approach to change, which you named before, but also which yoga is very big on, because one of the great teachings of yoga is to accept change, to accept that change is constant and that nothing will remain the same, and that that possibility is not real. And so here's yet another important point of how yoga can help.
Absolutely. And without change, you'd be dead.
Yes.
Without having to, without responding to change, your body would not be alive. Every time you breathe, that's change. So it is part of nature. It's fundamental.
And we are so resistant.
Oh, we are so
resistant to
resistant.
But interestingly enough, it's not even a real feature of the brain, because the brain, once you present the brain with a constant stimulus, the brain masks it.
Yes.
So you move to an apartment in front of a railroad, and you hear every train passing by, and after a year, you hear no train.
We had a chocolate shop in London, and people would come in and say, "Oh, this wonderful smell! How can you stand it?"
What smell? Exactly. What smell? Exactly. Yes, and certainly the advances in neuroplasticity are proving that the brain indeed changes, and that new connections are being created. And
all the time.
Is this an aspect, the passion aspect? Because certainly passion is fuel for neuroplasticity. When you're really passionate about it, you try new things that modify your brain. Is this aspect contemplated or included in the space program?
I can't speak for my colleagues, no. there are people who are philosophers as well as practitioners, and astronauts are highly selected, and I have met some incredible people. I have also met some terribly dull people. But I believe that one of the things, if they start out being dull, they don't usually stay dull when they've been in space. And the Apollo astronauts in particular are a very different breed. You know, there were two who landed and one who circled the moon. And the one who circled the moon and never landed, when they were on the dark side of the moon, to a man have said that they felt so separated from Earth, not being able to see Earth, and so isolated and so lonely, and that the emotion they felt they could not justify, because they knew what they were doing, they knew what the program was, where they were going to be in a minute or so. So it was a separation emotion, which is also a very interesting one in terms of life and passion and living and yoga.
And yoga, exactly, because the very root of the Sanskrit terms is yug, yog,
yes.
Togetherness.
Yeah. So the fact that they at that point were separated in a physical way on the dark side of the moon. Now, Mitchell, for instance, went into parapsychology when he came back. Has an institute in parapsychology. They all have become thinkers, you know, in out-of-body experience, near-death experience, all aspects of searching, reading. So they've become very interesting people, even if they didn't start out that way.
And
But the bureaucrats aren't that way.
Well, then maybe we should send them to space for a bit. And then bring them back and see. That's an idea. Are you planning to go into space?
One of my bosses asked me very early in my youth, well, of course you want to go into space. Of course I want to go to space. I get so car sick that the thought of going into space was totally terrifying to me. Now that I know how to control my motion sickness with breathing.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. We call it in physiology resistive inspiration.
Resistive.
Which is
Shitali. Shitali pranayama.
By any other name. Isn't it wonderful?
It is.
And this is what we tried to bring across in this hypothesis paper. That really we're looking at the same thing, folks.
Just with different names.
Yeah, that's right.
And then once one has the experience,
yes,
then no names are important anymore.
Which one did I do?
Exactly.
Absolutely no. And this is where we fall apart as a culture, as a world, as a people, as a humanities, when we start picking differences instead of looking at the similarities and what binds us together.
But what a conundrum, what a challenge for science that feeds off separateness, that feeds off separating in order to, in the best case scenario, then reintegrate. Perhaps if you agree with me, a lot of the scientific work has been wonderful in separating, but then the reintegration never happened.
Absolutely. And they're finding out even in educating medical students, for instance, or biologists or physiologists, that it's gone more and more separated, and it's systems, it's your toe, your arm, your leg, instead of the fact that, you've got a body and a head.
Yes.
And you.
Yes, exactly.
And it's coming back together, but not fast enough.
Fast enough.
Oh, there is no time.
Exactly, fast enough for who? Because
For me.
for me too, because I would like to see it. But
Yes.
let's convey that in the scope of human life as a species, we're fine.
We're fine. We're
We are
doing
fine.
very
but
well.
we would like to see it.
We would like to see it.
Well, then
Yes.
maybe that would be one of the passionate inspirations for you to live 800 years or so.
Maybe so.
How do you see the future of yoga therapy?
It's an interesting question to me, because I grew up in a very unusual environment. My father was 60 when I was born, and he was born and grew up in an island in Greece, and at age 17 decided he wanted to be a doctor. So he got on a boat and went to France, didn't speak a word of French, found a medical school and studied medicine. So he was a really old-time doctor. And this is the environment I grew up with, where asking questions and providing solutions in days when we didn't have the MRIs and the technology and the lab tests telling you what you should be.
As didn't have the ancient yogis.
Exactly. And plants and plant medications of plant origin were what we had. The passion flower and this was more sedative, and various herb teas, and which to this day I have. So that and that's the value of someone living a long life. To
knowledge. Yeah.
To be able not only to convey the knowledge in the written form, or the digital form these days, but in the verbal form, in the troubadour type of, where you can sit and talk about it, and talk about the stars, and have time to think, to contemplate, to watch, to ask questions. And what's scary for me is to see the young people fed information, bombarded. We have a situation where the brain is bombarded, barraged, overloaded, whereas the body is underloaded.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which is disastrous.
A bad ratio.
Bad ratio in the wrong way.
Yes.
And imagining and thinking and sitting and dreaming are elements that, unless you have parents that particularly encourage that, or an environment that particularly nurtures that,
they are strongly discouraged.
They're discouraged.
Because asking too many questions is a sign of ignorance. Yeah. Dreaming a lot is a sense of lack of reality.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is exactly the opposite. You're saying that these are the components of the soup of growth and
yes.
healthy aging.
Yes. Healthy living.
Healthy living, yes.
Healthy living.
How does this all relate to the spirit? Because we know that yoga, and mostly in the West, yoga is seen mainly as physical,
yes.
occasionally as mental,
yes.
and emotional, and the spirit, we're still getting there in many ways. What, in your personal opinion,
The spirit is obviously by its nature nondescript, but it's there.
Yeah.
And cannot be denied. I mean, there are deniers, but they call it something else. In their mind, they call it something else. And it's the energy. It's the kernel, I think, of energy that each of us has. Whether we give it a form or not,
or a name, or a shape,
or a shape, is immaterial. But I'm finding out. I mean, there are some interesting things happening in medicine. There was some paper over the weekend that obesity is perhaps due to the bacteria in our gut that either induce obesity or do the opposite. And what I thought is, this is wonderful, because the bacteria are there before you're born, they inhabit your, and then they're there after you're gone. And they really are the holders of your essence and the regulators.
So they could be the spirit.
So they could well be the spirit. So, it could take a lot of different forms. I don't want to be trivial.
My question was mainly whether you include or not, or whether spiritual aspects, a lot of which yoga bring to the table, if they are somehow included in the research, in the approach.
But they are in mine. First of all, I work a lot on intuition. And again, it's interesting that the older we get, the more aware we are of things that happen when merely by thinking or just happen, coincidences. Whatever.
Okay.
However you explain it. And to analyze it too much, I think, is just as restrictive as a scientist who focuses only one way that something works. Because no sooner do you find out about that way than someone finds out about some other way. So it's, my books, the spirit is there, the spirit inhabits.
Yes.
The spirit evolves, perhaps, and runs around the buffet of inhabitants.
Do you think or feel or anticipate that yoga therapy is somehow going to be in the future the most important modality?
Oh, absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely. Mindfulness and yoga therapy are, because coming back, I believe that the biggest problem to our health now is stress, or is our inability or lack of knowledge. You have a lot of talk about obesity and dieting. You have a lot of talk of sleeping and medications and even relaxation or mindfulness for that. You have, of course, masses of communication on exercise, trying to give you the biggest dose possible. We know stress has a bad name. I think stress is a stimulus. It's change. It's not bad or good. It's all in the eyes of the beholder. And to the extent that we need to address change as something that helps us grow, instead of something to be afraid of and to withdraw from, and therefore not live, as something that change, it helps us live, and therefore we need to adopt it, we need to embrace it, we need to work with it, profit from it. It's a gift.
And to understand it.
And to understand
Right.
it. Yes, and to understand it. So I definitely believe that starting with the stress conundrum and extending to understanding what life is about, to taking responsibility to one's life. And for taking responsibility for one's body. We have one body, one life.
That we know of.
That we know of. And we waste it often.
Yes.
And it's a shame.
I can easily see how we could sit here and talk for
a
couple
having
more
a great
hours.
time.
Likewise, and I do appreciate you joining us today and sharing with us your passion and your thoughts and your intuition. And I think that I also personally want to thank you in the name of humanity at large, because we might not see it in this lifetime, but certainly everything we do counts, everything we do has ripple effects, and you're certainly doing a lot. So thank you, and thank you for joining us today. I know you were quite far and came all the way.
I'm delighted to be here. I've grown tonight thanks to my discussion with you.
Oh, thank you.
And I've learned a lot.
Thank you very much. I hope to have you some other time here.
You're welcome, anytime.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
My guest tonight was Dr. Joan Vernikos, the former head of NASA's Space Health Program, Executive Director of Taksha Space Health and Aging Institute, which is an organization that specializes in cross-cutting short courses, lectures, seminars, workshops, and conferences that bring together experts in apparently disparate fields to find common links across the physiology and behavior of the broadest range of human conditions. I hope you liked our show today. And if you care to let me know, shoot me an email at antonio@yogiviews.com. I hope to see you the next time.